She was just a small-town girl with a broken past and a daisy necklace, until one runway show revealed she wasn't who she thought she was. Natalie Hart's life unravels in the most shocking way when love, betrayal, and a stolen identity collide. What happens when the truth you've been chasing turns your entire world upside down? This is a story of courage, secrets, and a legacy reborn. You won't believe how it ends. Where are you watching from? Tell us in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more powerful stories that will keep you hooked until the very last moment. The neon flickered above Ridgefield's only dive bar, casting fractured light over the cracked sidewalk as Natalie Hart leaned against the brick wall, her breath fogging in the cold. Inside, the air buzzed with laughter and spilled beer, the usual Friday night chaos her friends swore would do her good. "You need a break, Nat?" they'd said, pushing a drink into her hand. And she'd tried to forget the late nights working double shifts at the grocery store, tried to silence the guilt over her father's debts, the ones that clawed at her like unpaid ghosts. But no amount of tequila could numb the ache that had settled in her chest ever since she'd left behind the only boy who ever made her believe in something better. She stumbled past the jukebox, weaving through the crowd as the music pulsed. Her boots scuffed sticky tile floors, and her head swam with a pleasant haze. Her vision blurred slightly as she searched for the restroom, pushing open the nearest door without reading the sign. The instant it creaked open, she froze. It wasn't the restroom. A man stood inside, his back to her, halfway through unbuttoning his shirt. The dim bulb above flickered once, casting golden light over the angles of his shoulders and the sharp line of his jaw. He turned slightly, sensing her presence. Their eyes locked. Natalie's breath caught in her throat. The years collapsed in an instant. "Julian?" she gasped. Julian Blackwell turned fully now, his brows rising in surprise before settling into a look she knew too well. Half amusement, half wonder. "Natalie Hart," he said slowly, like tasting a name he hadn't said in years. Panic surged in her chest. Her wine glass tipped, sloshing red across his white shirt. "Oh my God, I'm so sorry," she cried, fumbling in her bag for a tissue. I didn't mean to, I thought." "You always did have a thing for dramatic entrances," he said with a low chuckle, brushing at the stain without concern. "Still clumsy, huh?" She looked up at him, his smile disarming, the scent of his cologne hitting her like a memory she didn't know she'd kept. High school dances. Summer nights by the lake. The time he carved her initials into the wooden bridge behind Millfield High. "I didn't think I'd ever see you again," she whispered. "Neither did I," Julian replied, his voice softer now, like he was measuring the space between them. "Come on. Let me get you home." Natalie tried to protest, mumbled something about being fine, but her legs wobbled beneath her, and before she could object, she was in the passenger seat of his car. The heater hummed, and outside, the Ohio night blurred into dark fields and distant streetlights. She stole glances at him. He looked different, older, sharper, the boy she'd once loved, now shaped into a man she barely knew. "Why are you here?" she finally asked, her voice barely above the hum of the wheels. "Just passing through," he said, eyes on the road. "But I couldn't let you stumble into trouble." His words settled in her like a warm echo. She looked away, unsure what to feel. Guilt? Relief? The ache of the past pulsed quietly between them. The next morning, Natalie's headache throbbed as she opened her apartment door, expecting the delivery guy or maybe a concerned friend. Instead, it was Julian, holding a manila folder. "I paid off your family's debt," he said without preamble. "All 50 grand? Gone." She stared, the world tilting. "You, what?" "I couldn't stand seeing you like this," he said. "You're not meant to live under that kind of weight." Her lips parted, but no words came. He stepped closer. "Marry me, Natalie." The room shrank around her, her pulse pounding in her ears. This man, this stranger with familiar eyes, was offering her a second chance. A dream, an impossible, terrifying dream. Her heart stuttered between fear and longing, between the girl who ran and the woman who remained. She hesitated, fingers brushing the daisy pendant around her neck, the one her mother gave her, the last fragment of a broken dream. Julian's eyes held hers, unwavering. "Okay," she said softly. And just like that, the past wasn't done with her yet. The daisy pendant felt heavier around Natalie's neck than it ever had before. She sat at the kitchen table the morning after Julian's sudden proposal, staring at the man now moving effortlessly around her tiny apartment like he belonged there. He'd made coffee, still wore the same clothes from the night before, except now, his stained white shirt was replaced with a worn gray sweater that looked more expensive than it let on. She watched him with quiet disbelief, her mind circling the same question over and over again. What is he really doing here? 7 years ago, she'd watched the rain slide down the windows of Millfield High and told Julian Blackwell she didn't love him, that someone else had swept her away. She'd said it with a trembling voice and a heart breaking in silence. He didn't believe her then. His eyes had searched hers with the kind of hurt that never really heals. But she hadn't looked back. Not when her father owed tens of thousands to men who threatened their lives. Not when her mother stopped designing. Not when they had to vanish into obscurity just to survive. That lie, the one meant to save him, had become her burden, and seeing Julian now in her space, smiling like nothing had shattered, it pulled every old wound wide open. He caught her staring and smiled. I know this place isn't exactly glamorous, he said, sipping coffee from a chipped mug, but it's kind of cozy. Natalie blinked, flushing. It's small. I've lived in smaller, he replied, and she frowned. That didn't sound like the Julian she remembered, the one destined for New York, success, sleek apartments with skyline views. She watched him more closely after that. He had an easy grace, like someone used to being in control. He never complained when she insisted on cooking at home, stretching grocery bills with casseroles and canned soups. He even let her cover the electric bill that month, saying it was only fair. But there were cracks in the illusion, tiny hairline fractures that unsettled her. His phone buzzed constantly. He always excused himself to take calls in the hallway. Once, she overheard him say something about quarterlies and licensing rights. Words that didn't belong in the mouth of a man who claimed to be between jobs. One night, as she folded laundry on the couch, he picked up one of her mom's old sketchbooks. Pages of designs, all daisy-motifed and meticulously hand-drawn, fluttered in his hands like delicate relics. "These are your mom's?" he asked, and there was something in his voice, a quiet reverence. Natalie nodded. Yeah, she was incredible. Had a real shot once, but someone stole her designs, framed her for plagiarism, got her blacklisted. Julian's eyes didn't leave the pages. Do you know who? No, she said, swallowing. She never found out. And honestly, after everything with my dad, chasing justice felt like a luxury. He closed the book gently, almost too gently. That's not right. Natalie shrugged. Life rarely is. But he didn't move. He sat there for a long moment, his jaw tight, fingers still resting on the closed sketchbook. Something about the way he looked at it unsettled her. Later that night, when she thought he was asleep, she found him on the balcony in the cold, phone pressed to his ear. He was speaking in a low, clipped voice. Yes, track everything Vaughn's touched in the last 15 years. Start with scholarship scandals, then the design thefts. There's a daisy motif. She wore it. Natalie pulled back, heart hammering. He was investigating someone connected to her mother? Why? The next morning she pretended nothing had changed. Stirred oatmeal with cinnamon, served him coffee like always. But her eyes kept drifting to the scuffed leather jacket he draped over the chair. It looked carefully worn, not naturally so, almost styled. Like everything about Julian, it seemed to hide more than it revealed. Julian, she asked softly, what did you do before you came back to Ridgefield? He looked up, smile easy. Odd jobs. I drifted for a while, tried not to think too much about the past. She nodded, forcing a smile, but her heart tightened. She didn't believe him. Not completely. Something was off. He was too polished, too thoughtful, and that protective way he looked at her, like he still saw the girl from years ago and didn't care how much dust life had thrown on her edges. It terrified her, because it meant he was here for something more than love. And Natalie Hart had already learned that nothing, not even love, came without a cost. The flyer fluttered against the bulletin board at the Ridgefield Library, half covered by a yoga class announcement and a missing cat poster. Natalie's eyes landed on the bold gold font, National New Voices Fashion Contest, sponsored by Vaughn Fashion Group. Her heart skipped. She reached out, pulled the flyer free, and scanned the details. The deadline was tight, the entry process intense, and the venue, New York City, felt like another planet. But the theme, Legacy through design made something stir deep in her chest. For years, she'd kept her mother's sketchbooks tucked away like relics of a past no one cared about. But maybe this was the chance to prove those designs were never stolen. They were hers. Her mother's. Real. She showed the flyer to Julian that night over a dinner of overcooked pasta. He studied it quietly, then looked up. "You should do it." Natalie blinked. "It's in New York. I have like $40 in my account, and no connections." Julian leaned back in his chair, eyes unreadable. "I'll cover it." Her stomach dropped. "Julian, no strings attached," he said quickly, reading the hesitation on her face. "Consider it an investment in justice." She wanted to protest, to remind him that she wasn't a charity case, that she didn't need rescuing, but a small voice inside whispered, "What if this is real? What if you could win?" She nodded slowly. "Okay, I'll try." A week later, they were on a train bound for New York. Natalie clutched her sketchbooks like armor, a suitcase of secondhand fabrics beside her. Julian didn't say much during the ride, eyes flicking across his phone screen. She caught glimpses of messages, background check complete, and Langston connection confirmed, but said nothing. She told herself he was helping with the contest logistics, maybe still doing some freelance business consulting. But the unease coiled tighter in her gut. The contest venue was overwhelming, a soaring Manhattan showroom with marble floors, glass walls, and towering floral installations. Other contestants wore cutting-edge couture, networking with stylists and bloggers like it was just another Tuesday. Natalie felt painfully small in her thrift store blazer and scuffed boots. She set up her table quietly, pinning swatches of fabric and taped sketches of dresses embroidered with delicate daisy motifs, tributes to her mother's stolen designs. "Charming," came a voice behind her. She turned. A tall woman in a crisp white pantsuit stood there, her smile razor-sharp. Platinum blonde hair swept back, posture commanding. "I'm Celeste Vaughn," she said smoothly, extending a hand. "Vaughn Fashion Group is, well, my family." Natalie's fingers stiffened. She shook the hand, eyes narrowing slightly. "Natalie Hart, designer." Celeste's gaze flicked down to the daisy pendant around Natalie's neck. For a fraction of a second, her smile faltered. "That's a lovely piece," she said, voice tight. "It belonged to my mother," Natalie said, instinctively touching it. "She was a designer too." Celeste tilted her head. "I see. Well, best of luck." She walked away, her heels clicking like gunshots on the polished floor. That night, Natalie couldn't sleep. Julian sat beside her on the hotel room bed, laptop open, brow furrowed. "She saw the necklace," Natalie said suddenly. "It rattled her." "Why would it rattle her?" Julian looked up, his jaw tense. "Because that necklace means more than you think." She stared at him. "What do you mean?" He hesitated, then shook his head. "Not yet. Just trust me." The next morning, things turned. A blog post surfaced, anonymous and scathing. Newcomer Natalie Hart accused of design theft, sketches eerily similar to past Vaughn collections. Screenshots appeared of supposed files, time-stamped to suggest Natalie had copied them from Vaughn's archives. She stood frozen at her display table as whispers swirled. One designer gave her a pitying look. Another smirked. A judge passed by with a raised eyebrow. Her hands shook as she pulled out her mother's sketchbooks. Proof. She had proof. But no one seemed to care. Backstage, she found Julian pacing. "They're trying to ruin me," she said, voice raw. "I know," he replied, "and we're gonna stop them." "How?" she demanded. "Celeste Vaughn owns this whole damn contest." Julian stepped closer, his voice a low promise. "She doesn't own the truth." Natalie felt her knees wobble, not from fear this time, but from something stronger. Resolve. She turned to him. "Whatever happens, I'm not backing down." Julian smiled, pride flickering in his eyes. "That's the Natalie I remember." Neither of them saw the stagehand nearby slip a wrench into his pocket, or the way Celeste watched them both from a distance, her smile tightening. The lights above the runway glinted like stars trapped in glass, and Natalie stood beneath them, trying to breathe through the tremor in her chest. Her fingers brushed over the soft fabric of the daisy-stitched gown draped on the mannequin. Everything she had worked for, everything her mother had lost, hung on these next few days. And yet something darker crept under her skin, a feeling that she was being watched, judged, targeted. Not by the competition, but by something more calculated. During the afternoon rehearsal, as she adjusted the hem of a dress on her model, Natalie heard a metallic groan from above. She glanced up, just in time to see the heavy lighting rig overhead tilt. Her body froze. Then, in a blur of motion, Julian burst forward and yanked her back, crashing them both to the ground as the rig came down with a deafening clang, narrowly missing them. Screams erupted. People scattered. Natalie clutched Julian's jacket with shaking fingers, heart hammering in her throat. "That wasn't an accident," she whispered. Julian helped her to her feet, his gaze sweeping the scene, jaw clenched. "You're right," he said grimly, "and I'm going to prove it." Security rushed in. Stagehands scrambled to explain. A few murmured about loose bolts, maybe wear and tear. But Natalie saw the glances, the hurried excuses, and most of all, she saw Celeste Vaughn standing on the balcony above, unmoving, her expression unreadable. Later, back in their hotel room, Julian gently applied a cool compress to a bruise forming on Natalie's arm. His touch was careful, but the silence between them throbbed with unspoken truths. She watched him, the way he moved, the way he kept checking his phone, murmuring into it like a man coordinating a mission, not just comforting a fiancé. "You're always there," she said softly. "When something goes wrong, when I need saving. But I still don't know why." Julian looked up, his eyes dark with conflict. "Because I care about you, more than I can explain." She wanted to believe him. God, part of her did. But there were too many holes in his story, too many moments that felt rehearsed. The next day, the competition's final round was announced. A live runway presentation, with judges scoring not just the clothes but the story behind them. Natalie poured herself into her designs, every stitch a tribute to her mother's stolen dreams. But as she worked, doubt gnawed at her. What if she wasn't just being sabotaged? What if she was also being protected by someone who wasn't telling the whole truth? That night, while Julian was out, she found his laptop still open. A document blinked on the screen, a profile of Celeste Vaughn, and beneath it something else. A hospital record, her own name, her birth date, and beside it another file marked, Vaughn Infant ID Discrepancy. Natalie stared, her heart crawling up her throat. When Julian returned, she didn't pretend. "What is this?" she asked, holding the screen toward him. "Why do you have my birth records? Why are you digging into Celeste's family?" Julian didn't look surprised. Instead, he stepped closer, voice low. "Because there's something you need to know, Natalie. That necklace you wear, it's not just a keepsake. It's a Vaughn heirloom, one that vanished 25 years ago, one given to their newborn daughter. Your mother, your real mother, might not be who you think she is." Natalie backed away, shaking her head. "No, Diane raised me. She loved me." "I'm not saying she didn't," Julian said, eyes gentle now. "But I think there was a switch, in the hospital. You were born the same night as Celeste, same clinic, same floor. There was chaos that night, power outage, short staff. It's possible they gave you to the wrong family." Tears welled in Natalie's eyes. "That's insane." "I have proof," Julian said. "Blood type reports, matching heirloom records. Celeste's type doesn't match her supposed parents. Yours does." Natalie sat down slowly, hands trembling, her entire world tilted on its axis. Everything she knew about her life, her mother, her past, suddenly cracked open. "Why didn't you tell me this sooner?" she asked, voice raw. "Because you needed to win this on your own first," he said. "You needed to believe in yourself, not in some name." For a long moment, Natalie didn't speak. Then she looked up, jaw set. "Tomorrow I walk that runway, not as a Vaughn, not as a victim, as Natalie Hart, the woman my mother raised, and I'm going to win." Julian nodded, pride and pain flickering across his face. "Then I'll be right there beside you, no matter what the truth turns out to be." The morning of the runway show dawned crisp and bright, but Natalie's stomach twisted with nerves. She stood backstage at the Vaughn showroom, clutching the edge of her table as final touches were made to her models' makeup and dresses. Each piece in her collection shimmered with defiance, elegant silhouettes embroidered with daisies, every stitch a quiet battle cry for her mother, for herself, and for the truth that had been buried too long. Julian stood at a distance near the entry arch, dressed sharply in a dark suit that made him look every bit the powerful man he was, no longer hiding, no longer playing broke. His eyes never left her. She could feel the weight of his gaze, grounding her. But it wasn't enough to silence the voices, the online blogs that still labeled her a fraud, the judges who whispered about authenticity, the competitors who looked at her like an interloper. Worst of all, Celeste was here, seated front row in a snow-white gown like a queen presiding over her kingdom. Her lips curled into a smile as she locked eyes with Natalie. Natalie turned away, her heart pounding. The daisy necklace at her throat felt like armor now, no longer just a memory, but a mystery she was determined to solve. She could feel the story unfolding, one thread at a time, and she was no longer afraid of where it led. The lights dimmed, the music swelled, the show began. Her models walked the runway with confidence, each dress flowing like poetry under the spotlights. Gasps of appreciation rippled through the crowd. For a moment, Natalie allowed herself to believe. Maybe this was her moment. Maybe justice could bloom in full view. Then the screen behind the stage flickered. Without warning, grainy images appeared, mock-ups of her designs but dated earlier under the Vaughn label. A murmur rose in the audience. Whispers turned into confusion, then suspicion. Someone had planted doctored files. Again. Natalie's blood ran cold. She turned, expecting chaos, but Julian was already moving. He stepped onto the stage, commanding the room with nothing but presence. "Stop the show," he said, voice sharp and calm. Gasps filled the space. "I'm Julian Blackwell," he continued, CEO of Blackwell Fashion Group, "and I can assure you what you've just seen is a lie." He signaled to a tech team positioned near the sound booth. A new presentation replaced the fake images. A slideshow of evidence, screenshots of Celeste's emails to a hacker, payments to stagehands, and correspondence with a lawyer to block a DNA test. The final slide was a lab result. It showed no genetic match between Celeste and Richard and Evelyn Vaughn. But Natalie? She matched. The room fell silent. Celeste shot to her feet, livid. "This is slander. I am their daughter." Evelyn Vaughn stood slowly in the front row, her voice trembling. "That necklace," she whispered, pointing to the pendant around Natalie's neck. "It belonged to our baby girl. We lost her that night. And we never stopped looking." Richard Vaughn's face was pale as paper. "It's her. Natalie is our daughter." Natalie staggered back. "No," she said, voice shaking. "Diane, she raised me. She's my mother. And she always will be," Julian said, stepping beside her, gently steadying her. "But this is part of your story too." Security approached Celeste as she screamed and resisted. The crowd watched, stunned, as she was escorted out, her empire unraveling in real time. The judges returned to the stage minutes later, faces solemn but clear. "After careful review," one announced, "we declare Natalie Hart the rightful winner of this year's competition. Her designs are original, her story undeniable." Cheers erupted. Natalie stood frozen, tears brimming in her eyes. She turned to Julian. "You did this. You risked everything." "No," he said. "You did. I just stood by the woman I believe in." In the weeks that followed, the truth made headlines. Celeste faced charges of fraud and conspiracy. The Vaughns officially welcomed Natalie into their family, but she refused to turn her back on Diane. Instead, she proposed a new vision, Hart and Vaughn, a fashion house built on both legacies. On the day of her wedding to Julian, held in a grand hall overlooking Central Park, Natalie wore a gown of her own design, soft ivory silk with daisy embroidery, delicate but unmissable. Margaret, Diane, stood beside her, pride radiant in her smile. Evelyn and Richard sat in the front row, holding hands. And beside the cake, an old scruffy dog named Daisy napped with a bow tie around his neck. As the music faded and the applause swelled, Natalie took the microphone. "This isn't just a story about fashion," she said. "It's about identity, about truth, about fighting for the people who love us and for the people we become when we stop running and finally decide to rise." And as she turned to Julian, her fingers tightening around his, she knew that after everything, every lie, every loss, every fight, this was her beginning. Not the girl lost in Ridgefield, not the victim of someone else's theft. She was Natalie Hart, designer, daughter, fighter, and no one would take her name from her again. This story teaches us a powerful lesson about identity, truth, and resilience. Natalie Hart's journey reminds us that even when the world doubts us, when lies cloud our path and the weight of our past tries to hold us down, we can still rise. Her story is not just about fashion or stolen dreams. It's about reclaiming your voice, standing up for justice, and honoring the people who shaped you, no matter where you come from. Natalie didn't win because she had money or influence. She won because she never gave up on herself or her mother. She faced betrayal, danger, and uncertainty, but chose to fight with integrity and heart. What matters most is not the name we're born with or the circumstances we inherit. It's the courage to chase truth, even when it's uncomfortable. It's the willingness to forgive, to trust, and to rebuild from brokenness. Natalie embraced her past while forging a future on her own terms, and in doing so, she inspired everyone around her. So if you've ever felt overlooked, misunderstood, or like your story didn't matter, remember Natalie. Your voice is powerful. Your dreams are worth fighting for, and your truth will always find a way to shine. Where are you tuning in from? We'd love to know. Drop your city or country in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel so you won't miss more inspiring stories like this. Let's keep growing, learning, and believing together.